Hi, this is Alex from devstories.eu. Docker Masterclass, Episode 8 of 18. You deploy a database inside a container, write thousands of rows, and everything runs perfectly. Then you delete the container to update the image, and your entire database vanishes forever. By default, container storage is strictly temporary. To prevent data loss, we need data persistence basics. When a container starts, it creates a writable layer on top of its underlying image. Any files the container creates or modifies are stored in this specific layer. If the container is destroyed, that layer is destroyed right along with it. The data is entirely ephemeral. It does not exist outside the container's own lifecycle. To keep data safe, you have to route it out of the container and onto the host machine. Docker offers two primary mechanisms for this: bind mounts and managed volumes. A bind mount maps a specific explicit path on your host machine directly to a path inside the container. You tell Docker exactly which folder on your laptop should appear inside the container environment. This is heavily dependent on your host operating system and local file structure. The host machine retains full control over the files. This approach is perfect for local development. You bind mount your local source code directory into your container's web application path. When you edit and save a script on your laptop, the container reads that updated file immediately. You get instant hot reloading without rebuilding the container image every time you change a line of code. The second mechanism is a managed volume. Instead of pointing to a specific path you control on your hard drive, you ask Docker to create a storage entity. Docker provisions the space on your host machine and manages it completely. You do not need to know where Docker physically puts the files on your host system. You just give the volume a name and tell the container where to mount it internally. Volumes are the standard solution for database persistence. When running PostgreSQL, you create a volume by running a simple command and giving it an identifier, like dbData. Then, when starting your container, you pass a configuration flag linking that dbData volume to the internal path where Postgres writes its table records. If you stop and delete the database container, Docker leaves the volume completely alone. When you spin up a new container later, you simply attach that existing volume and all your records are intact. Here is the key insight. The choice between these two methods comes down to who needs to access the files. Use bind mounts when your host machine needs to actively interact with the data, like a developer editing source code. Use managed volumes when the container owns the data, like a database engine writing records, and you just want Docker to keep those files safe across container restarts. Ephemeral containers are a design choice, not a flaw, because they force you to decouple your persistent state from your runtime compute. Always assume your container will be destroyed immediately and explicitly map your persistent state outside of it. If you find these episodes helpful, you can support the show by searching for Dev Stories EU on Patreon. That is all for this one. Thanks for listening and keep building.